Clara Whitmore's hands were shaking so badly that the white roses slipped from her fingers, scattering across the church floor like fallen hopes. 300 pairs of eyes burned into her back, 300 witnesses to her destruction. The groom's seat stood empty. 45 minutes now, and still Julian Ashford had not come. She would not cry. She would not fall. But God help her, she was dying inside that ivory gown. Then the church doors groaned open, and the wrong brother walked in. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to my channel and follow Clara's story to the very end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this tale travels. The summer heat pressed down on Philadelphia like a punishment from God himself. Clara Whitmore stood at the altar of Christ Church, her ivory gown clinging to her skin with sweat she couldn't wipe away. 300 of Philadelphia's finest families packed the pews behind her. 300 people she barely knew invited by the Ashford family to witness her transformation from nobody to somebody. 45 minutes. Julian was 45 minutes late. Perhaps the carriage wheel broke, her mother whispered from the front pew. Her voice stretched thin as old lace. The roads from the Ashford estate can be treacherous. Clara didn't turn around. She couldn't. If she looked at her mother's face at the desperate hope fighting against creeping horror, she would shatter into pieces right there on the altar steps. Surely any moment now, her father added, but his voice cracked on the last word. Clara's fingers tightened around what remained of her bouquet. The white roses were wilting in the heat, their edges browning and curling inward. She knew exactly how they felt. Behind her, the whispers had started. 45 minutes. I heard Julian Ashford was seen riding north yesterday evening. North? But the wedding is here. Precisely. The word sliced through Clara's spine like a blade dipped in ice. She kept her chin lifted, her spine straight, her eyes fixed on the cross above the altar. She was Clara Whitmore. Her family had lost everything, their fortune, their standing, their future, but they had not lost their dignity. Not yet. Don't cry, don't faint, don't let them see you break. The church doors groaned. Clara's heart lurched with desperate, foolish hope. She spun around, roses scattering from her trembling hands, expecting to see Julian rushing in with apologies and explanations. Instead, she saw his brother. Nathaniel Ashford stood in the doorway like something carved from stone. He wore black, all black, as though he'd come to a funeral rather than a wedding. His dark hair was swept back from a face that might have been handsome if not for the cold steel in his gray eyes. Those eyes found Clara. The whispers died. Every soul in that church held their breath. Clara had met Nathaniel Ashford exactly 3 times during her courtship with Julian. Each encounter had left her feeling like a butterfly pinned under glass. He never smiled, rarely spoke beyond what courtesy demanded. Julian had laughed about it once, calling his elder brother the family gargoyle, and Clara had hated herself for not defending a man she didn't know. Now the gargoyle was walking toward her. His boots echoed against the stone floor, each step deliberate, each step driving the silence deeper. He stopped before her close enough that she caught the scent of cedar and something darker like smoke from a fire long burned out. "Miss Whitmore." His voice was low, precise, each syllable measured like coins being counted. "I bear a message from my brother." "Don't say it. Please God, don't say it. He will not be coming." The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. Somewhere behind her, a woman gasped. A man coughed. The whispers erupted into a roar that filled Clara's ears until she heard nothing but the rushing of her own blood. Her knees buckled. Strong hands caught her elbows before she could fall. Nathaniel's grip was firm, impersonal, but he did not release her. "Breathe," he commanded, and somehow she obeyed. "Where is he?" The question scraped from her throat. Where did Julian go? That is irrelevant now. Irrelevant. Her voice cracked like breaking glass. I am standing at an altar in front of 300 people wearing a wedding gown for a wedding that ain't happening, and you tell me it's irrelevant. Something shifted in those gray eyes. Not warmth, something harder to name. What I tell you, Miss Whitmore, is that my brother is a coward and a fool. He has placed you in an impossible position. Nathaniel's gaze swept across the watching crowd. His expression darkened with what might have been contempt. These people will feast on your humiliation for years. Your family's reputation will not survive the scandal. Your prospects will be destroyed. Each word was a hammer blow, driving the truth deeper into her chest. He was right. She knew he was right. By tomorrow, Clara Whitmore would be the cautionary tale mothers whispered to their daughters. The foolish girl who believed a wealthy man actually loved her. Unless, Nathaniel said. Clara's breath caught. Unless. His hands were still on her elbows. His gray eyes, gray as a winter storm rolling across the Pennsylvania hills, held hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Unless you marry me instead. The world stopped making sense. Clara stared at the man before her, certain she had misheard. Behind her, the whispers transformed into gasps of shock. But the sound came from far away, as though she were underwater, drowning slowly. I beg your pardon. You heard me clearly, Miss Whitmore. His voice remained steady, utterly calm, as though he proposed marriage to humiliated women every day of the week. Marry me, today, now, in front of these witnesses. Transform scandal into spectacle, abandonment into opportunity. You cannot be serious. I am always serious. His grip on her elbows tightened just enough for Clara to feel the heat of his hands burning through her sleeves. She searched his face for any sign of mockery, any hint that this was some cruel jest to compound her destruction. She found nothing but cold, implacable resolve. Why? The question burst from her. Why would you do this? My reasons are my own. That ain't good enough. You cannot expect me to marry a stranger without explanation. I can expect whatever I choose. His voice dropped lower. I am offering you salvation, Miss Whitmore. The alternative is to walk out of this church alone, past 300 witnesses who will ensure your ruin spreads across Pennsylvania before nightfall. Clara's chest constricted so tight she could barely breathe. She thought of her mother who had wept with joy when Julian proposed. She thought of her father who had borrowed heavily against their already mortgaged home to fund this wedding, this dress, this desperate grasp at respectability. She thought of her younger sisters, Louisa and Abigail, and the doors that would close forever if Clara became the jilted bride of Philadelphia. My family, she whispered. The debts will be addressed. Nathaniel said it as though resolving financial ruin was as simple as ordering tea. Your father's obligations will become mine. Your mother and sisters will be provided for. You will want for nothing. It was too much, too sudden, too impossible to process. Clara felt as though she'd stepped into someone else's life, someone else's nightmare, someone else's incomprehensible rescue. I don't understand, she said. You barely know me. We've spoken perhaps a dozen words in the entirety of our acquaintance. I know enough. What does that mean? For the first time, something different crossed his features. Not warmth, not softness, but something like reluctant acknowledgement. It means, Miss Whitmore, that I have observed you for the past 6 months, while you endured my brother's courtship, while you navigated his carelessness with grace, while you tolerated his dismissiveness with dignity, while you smiled through his casual cruelties as though they did not wound you. His voice dropped lower still, meant only for her. I know you deserve better than what Julian offered. I know you are stronger than anyone in this church realizes, and I know that if you walk away from this altar alone, you will spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. Clara's throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like this, seen her like this, laid bare truths she had hidden even from herself. So you're offering me what exactly? She forced the words out. A business arrangement. A marriage of convenience. I'm offering you a choice. His gray eyes held hers unwavering. The only one available to you in this moment. Clara looked past him at the assembled crowd. She saw the vultures circling, eager for blood. She saw her mother's tear-streaked face. She saw her father's ashen pallor. She saw her younger sisters clutching each other in the family pew. She thought of Julian, charming, careless Julian, who had promised her forever and then fled without even the courage to tell her himself. She thought of all the years ahead, marked by whispers, by pity, by closed doors. And then she thought of the man standing before her, cold as marble, but offering her a lifeline nonetheless. If I say yes, Clara said slowly, what happens then? Then we proceed. Nathaniel glanced toward Reverend Miller, who stood frozen at the altar with his prayer book clutched to his chest like a shield. The ceremony continues. The guests witness a wedding. The scandal becomes a sensation, yes, but a favorable one. The jilted bride becomes Mrs. Nathaniel Ashford, mistress of Ashford House, and no one will dare pity her again. Mrs. Nathaniel Ashford, mistress of Ashford House. The title felt foreign, impossible, like trying to wear a crown made for another woman's head. And afterward you will come to Ashford House as my wife. You will have your own chambers, your own staff, your own allowance. I will make no demands of you that you do not wish to fulfill. Something passed through his gaze, too quick to identify. I can be a cold husband, Miss Whitmore. I will not pretend otherwise. But I will never abandon you at an altar. I will never make you a fool in front of witnesses. That much I can promise. It was not a declaration of love. It was not even a declaration of affection. But standing in the wreckage of her dreams wearing a gown meant for another man's promises, Clara found that it was enough. Yes, she heard herself say. I'll marry you. Nathaniel released her elbows at last. The absence of his touch left her strangely unsteady. Reverend Miller. His voice carried across the stunned silence of the church. We will proceed. The ceremony that followed would live in Clara's memory as a fever dream. Reverend Miller, a nervous man who had been expecting to marry her to Julian, fumbled through his prayer book with trembling hands. The liturgy had to be adjusted, names changed. The special license that had been prepared for one brother hastily amended to accommodate the other. Through it all, Nathaniel stood beside her like a statue, his presence both anchor and enigma. Clara heard her own voice as though from a great distance, reciting vows that felt too large for her mouth, to have and to hold, for better or worse, for richer or poorer. Words that should have bound her to Julian now bound her to this stranger instead. This cold, powerful man who had swept in like a storm and upended everything. His hand was steady when he took hers to slide on the ring, a band of white gold set with a single sapphire. It belonged to my mother, he murmured. The ring was slightly loose on her finger, but it felt strangely right. His skin was warm against her cold fingers. Clara found herself wondering absurdly if Nathaniel Ashford ran hotter than ordinary men. With this ring, I thee wed. His voice never wavered, never softened. But there was weight to the words that made something twist beneath Clara's ribs. Reverend Miller pronounced them man and wife. Nathaniel leaned down to press a kiss to her cheek. Brief, formal, his lips barely grazing her skin before he withdrew. It was done. Clara Whitmore was now Clara Ashford, and she had no earthly idea what that meant. The reception was mercifully brief. The wedding breakfast had been prepared for a different groom, the seating arrangements made for a different couple. But somehow everything proceeded as though this had been the plan all along. Clara smiled until her face ached, accepted congratulations that ranged from genuine to incredulous to barely concealed envy, and tried not to notice the way people looked at her husband. Because they did look. Everyone looked at Nathaniel Ashford with the wary fascination reserved for wolves among sheep. He moved through the crowd like a predator through still water. exchanging the minimum required pleasantries, deflecting questions about his brother with icy finality, and never once straying far from Clara's side. "People are staring," she murmured during a rare moment when no one demanded their attention. "Let them." His hand rested at her waist, the touch light but proprietary. By tomorrow, they'll have constructed a dozen romantic narratives to explain today's events. Let them believe whatever fiction brings them comfort. And what's the truth? Nathaniel looked down at her, his gray eyes unreadable. The truth, Mrs. Ashford, is rarely as interesting as the story. Before she could respond, her mother appeared, fresh tears streaming down her face. "My darling girl." She gathered Clara into an embrace that smelled of rosewater and relief. "I don't understand what happened, but you're safe now. You're protected." She pulled back, clasping Clara's hands. "Mistress of Ashford House, my daughter." Clara tried to summon a reassuring smile. "It's rather a lot to take in, Mama." "Mr. Ashford." Her mother turned to Nathaniel, dropping into a curtsy so deep she nearly lost her balance. "I cannot begin to express our gratitude. When he, ma'am." Nathaniel's voice was not unkind, but it brooked no further discussion. "Your daughter has had an exhausting day. I'm sure you understand that we must depart for Ashford House this evening." "Of course. Of course." Her mother squeezed Clara's hands one final time, her eyes bright with tears and something that looked almost like awe. "Write to me, darling. Tell me everything." Clara promised she would, though she had no idea what she would say. The carriage that waited outside the church was black and gleaming, pulled by 4 matched gray horses that looked as cold and elegant as their master. A footman in Ashford livery helped Clara inside. She sank onto velvet cushions that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Nathaniel settled across from her, his long legs stretched out, his gaze fixed on the passing countryside as the carriage lurched into motion. Silence filled the space between them. Heavy, strange, alive with questions neither of them seemed willing to ask. Clara studied her new husband in the fading afternoon light. He was handsome, she supposed, in the way that mountains were handsome, impressive, forbidding, not something you wanted to get too close to. His jaw could cut glass, his cheekbones severe, his mouth set in a line that suggested smiling was a foreign concept. "You're staring," he said without looking at her. Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. "I apologize. I was simply wondering what manner of man you've married." Now he did turn, and something that might have been dark amusement stirred in his expression. "A fair question given the circumstances." "You must admit the circumstances are rather unusual." "They are unprecedented." He inclined his head slightly. "And yet here we are." "Here we are," Clara echoed. She twisted the unfamiliar ring on her finger, watching the sapphire catch the dying light. "May I ask you something?" "You may ask. Whether I answer remains to be seen." "Where is Julian? Where did he go?" The amusement vanished from Nathaniel's face, replaced by something harder, colder. "My brother has fled north. Boston, I'm told, though by now he may have moved on. He left a letter explaining that he found himself unable to proceed with the marriage." "Unable?" Clara repeated. "What does that mean?" "It means he is a coward who could not face the consequences of his own choices." Nathaniel's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "It means he decided that his freedom was worth more than your future, your family's security, or basic human decency." The words should have hurt more than they did. Perhaps the wound was too fresh, too deep for proper pain. Or perhaps some part of Clara had always known that Julian's charm was merely surface, his promises as substantial as morning mist. "Did you know?" she asked. "Did you know he was going to run?" The silence that followed was heavy, weighted with something Clara couldn't name. "I suspected." Nathaniel's voice was quiet now. "My brother has always been skilled at evading responsibility. When he failed to arrive at the church by the appointed hour, I knew." And you decided to intervene. I decided to offer you an alternative. Why? The question that had plagued her since he first spoke those impossible words at the altar. You still haven't told me why. Nathaniel turned back to the window, his profile sharp against the gray sky. Because you deserved better than what he gave you, he said quietly. Because someone needed to act and no one else would. Because... He stopped, jaw tightening. Because I could. It wasn't an answer. Not really. But something in his voice, some thread of emotion carefully suppressed, told Clara that there was more to this story than Nathaniel Ashford was willing to reveal. The carriage crested a hill, and Clara's breath caught. Ashford House rose from the landscape like something out of a Gothic tale. Gray stone, tall windows glittering with candlelight, vast grounds spreading in every direction like a kingdom unto itself. It was beautiful, and terrible, and overwhelming in equal measure. "Welcome home," Nathaniel said, and Clara heard something in his voice she couldn't quite identify. The carriage wheels crunched on gravel as they approached the main entrance. A small army of servants had assembled to greet their new mistress. Clara looked at the impossible house, the silent husband, the life that had been thrust upon her without warning or preparation. What had she agreed to? And more importantly, why did Nathaniel Ashford's gray eyes hold shadows that seemed far deeper than mere coldness? The carriage door opened. Clara stepped into her new life, the questions multiplying with every breath. Ashford House swallowed Clara whole. The moment she stepped through those doors, she understood why people whispered about this place, why society matrons lowered their voices when they spoke of Nathaniel Ashford and his lonely empire. The air itself felt different here, heavier, older, thick with secrets she couldn't name. A woman stepped forward from the shadows. Tall, spare. Gray hair pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her skin. Her black dress marked her as the housekeeper, and her eyes assessed Clara with the clinical precision of a jeweler examining a stone of questionable value. "Mrs. Ashford." The words came out flat, neither welcoming nor hostile. "I am Mrs. Pemberton. Welcome to Ashford House." Clara felt Nathaniel's hand press against her lower back. The touch steadied her, though she couldn't have said why. "Mrs. Pemberton manages the household," he said. "She will see to anything you require. The mistress's chambers have been prepared." Mrs. Pemberton's tone remained professionally neutral. "Per Mr. Ashford's instructions." Something in those words made Clara's spine stiffen. Per Mr. Ashford's instructions. What instructions? When had there been time for instructions? But Nathaniel was already guiding her toward the grand staircase, and she had no opportunity to ask. Her chambers were not chambers. They were a kingdom. A sitting room with windows she couldn't bear to look through, not yet, not while her mind was still spinning. A dressing room larger than her entire bedroom back home. And the bedroom itself dominated by a bed so vast she could have fit her whole family inside it. These were my mother's rooms. Nathaniel's voice made Clara turn. He stood near the fireplace where flames already crackled against the evening chill. His face was half in shadow, half in light, and something in his expression made her chest tighten. She died when I was 12. These rooms have been closed ever since. Clara's hand rose to her throat. 20 years. 22. The weight of that statement settled over her like a physical thing. 22 years these rooms had been shuttered, preserved in grief, and he had opened them for her, a woman he barely knew. A wife he had claimed out of some motivation she still couldn't understand. That's... She struggled for words. That's very generous. Generosity has nothing to do with it. His voice had returned to its usual coolness. The brief glimpse of something softer vanished like smoke. You are the mistress of Ashford House now. You should have rooms befitting the position. Before she could respond, a knock at the door announced a young woman with copper hair and freckles scattered across her nose like cinnamon. She curtsied deeply, her eyes bright with poorly concealed curiosity. "Ma'am, I'm Molly Sullivan. I've been assigned as your lady's maid." "Assigned by whom?" "By Mr. Ashford, ma'am." Molly's voice dropped to something almost conspiratorial. This morning, hours before the wedding, hours before Julian had fled, hours before Nathaniel stepped in to save her. And yet somehow preparations had already been made. Clara's gaze snapped to her husband. Questions burned on her tongue, dozens of them, hundreds, but he was already moving toward the door. "I'll leave you to rest," he said. "Dinner will be served at 8. Molly will show you to the dining room when you're ready." Wait. But he was gone. The door closing behind him with a soft click that felt far too final. Clara sank onto the edge of the enormous bed. Her wedding gown pooled around her like a silk ghost. The room was beautiful, undeniably beautiful, but it felt like standing inside a painting. Lovely to look at. Impossible to touch without leaving smudges. "Ma'am?" Molly's voice was gentle. Careful, like she was approaching a wounded animal. "Shall I help you change? There's a nightdress laid out, and I can draw a bath if you'd like." A bath. When had she last had a proper bath? Hot water and scented oils and time to simply exist. "Yes," Clara heard herself say. "A bath would be lovely." Molly disappeared through a door Clara hadn't noticed, and soon the sound of running water filled the silence. Clara wandered the sitting room, her fingers trailing over furniture that probably cost more than her father's debts. And then she saw the dress. It hung in the dressing room, clearly visible through the open door. Not her wedding gown, which lay wilted where she'd dropped it. This was something else entirely. A gown of deep emerald velvet, trimmed with silver embroidery that caught the light like trapped stars. Beside it, slippers to match. A shawl of cashmere so soft it felt like touching clouds. "Molly." Clara's voice came out strange, too high, too thin. "Where did this come from?" Molly appeared in the doorway, a towel over her arm. Her expression flickered just for a moment before settling into careful neutrality. "Mr. Ashford had it commissioned, ma'am, last week, for tonight." Last week, before the wedding, before any of this had happened. "I don't understand," Clara whispered. But even as she said it, a strange suspicion began to form in her mind. A suspicion that made no sense. That couldn't possibly be true. How much had Nathaniel Ashford known? How much had he planned? And what exactly had she married into? The bath helped. Somewhat. Clara soaked until the water turned cold, and her fingers pruned, letting the heat work its way into muscles she hadn't realized were clenched. Molly chattered while she worked about the house, the staff, the gardens, and Clara let the words wash over her like background music. "The staff's been in a right flutter, ma'am, if you don't mind me saying. Nobody expected well." Molly caught herself. "Things happened quickly is all." "That's one way to put it. But everyone's glad, ma'am, truly. Mr. Ashford, he's not one for warmth, but he's fair, always fair. The staff respects him something fierce." Clara turned her head. "Do they?" "Oh yes, ma'am. Mrs. Pemberton's been here 40 years since before the old Mr. Ashford passed. She says Mr. Nathaniel's the best Master Ashford house has ever had." Molly's voice dropped. "Even if he don't smile much." "Does he ever smile?" The question slipped out before Clara could stop it. Molly paused in her work. Her expression softened into something almost sad. "I saw him smile once, ma'am. 3 years back when one of the stable cats had kittens. He thought no one was watching." She shook her head. "It changed his whole face, made him look like a different man entirely." Clara tried to picture it. Nathaniel Ashford, cold and severe, smiling at kittens. She couldn't make the image fit. Dinner was an ordeal. Clara descended the stairs in the emerald gown because what else was she supposed to wear, and found Nathaniel waiting at the bottom. His gaze swept over her, once sharp and assessing, and something flickered in those gray eyes. "The dress suits you," he said. It was possibly the most inadequate compliment in the history of language. And yet somehow the way his eyes lingered told her everything his words didn't say. They ate at opposite ends of a dining table long enough to seat 30. Servants moved silently around them, filling glasses, removing plates, and Clara found herself wondering if this was how every meal would be. Formal. Silent. The two of them separated by miles of polished wood and years of unspoken things. "You're not eating." Nathaniel's voice cut through her thoughts. Clara looked down at her plate. She'd been pushing food around for 10 minutes without taking a bite. "I suppose I'm not hungry." "You should eat anyway. You've had a difficult day." That's putting it mildly. Something that might have been amusement crossed his features, there and gone quick as lightning. "I imagine so." Silence fell again. Clara forced herself to take a bite. Chewed. Swallowed. The food was excellent, of course it was, but it might as well have been sawdust for all she tasted it. "May I ask you something?" she said finally. Nathaniel set down his fork. "You may." The dress, the room, the preparations. Clara met his eyes across the endless table. "You had them ready before the wedding, before Julian ran. How?" The silence stretched between them. Long, heavy. "I told you," Nathaniel said slowly. "I suspected my brother might not appear." Suspected. You suspected he would abandon me at the altar, and your response was to commission a gown and prepare your mother's rooms. Yes. The word hung in the air. That makes no sense. Perhaps not to you. Then explain it to me. Clara's voice rose despite herself, because from where I'm sitting it looks like you planned this, all of it. Like you knew exactly what would happen, and you were waiting to... To what? Nathaniel's voice was quiet. Dangerous. To what Mrs. Ashford swoop in and claim you for myself. Take advantage of your humiliation. I don't know. Clara's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. That's the problem. I don't know anything about you. I don't know why you married me. I don't know what you want. I don't know... I wanted to protect you. The words stopped her cold. What? Nathaniel rose from his chair. Slowly, deliberately. He walked the length of that endless table until he stood beside her close enough that she had to crane her neck to meet his eyes. I have watched my brother hurt people for 28 years, Mrs. Ashford. I have watched him charm and deceive and abandon. I have watched him leave wreckage in his wake and walk away whistling. His jaw tightened. When I saw you at that altar alone, humiliated, about to be destroyed by his cowardice, I could not stand by and watch it happen. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. So you married me. So I married you. Out of pity. Out of... He stopped. Ran a hand through his dark hair. For the first time since she'd met him, Nathaniel Ashford looked uncertain. I don't know what to call it. Duty. Honor. Something else I haven't found a name for yet. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. They stared at each other, inches apart, the air between them crackling with something Clara couldn't identify. Finally, Nathaniel stepped back. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow will be easier. He was gone before she could respond. Clara sat alone at the empty table, surrounded by servants who pretended not to see, and wondered if anything about this strange new life would ever feel easy. Morning arrived with the smell of chocolate and the rustle of curtains being drawn. Clara blinked awake, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling. The too soft bed. The daylight streaming through windows that faced the wrong direction. Then memory crashed over her like a cold wave. The altar. The abandonment. The husband. "Good morning, ma'am." Molly appeared beside the bed with a tray that held a delicate china cup, steam curling from its contents. "I've brought chocolate. And Mrs. Ashford the elder. Mrs. Ashford, she's requested to see you at 11. Clara sat up slowly. Her body ached in strange places from yesterday's tension. "The elder, Mrs. Ashford." "Mr. Nathaniel's grandmother, ma'am. She don't live in the main house. She's got her own wing on the east side, but she wishes to meet you." Something in Molly's careful tone suggested this wasn't optional. "What should I expect?" Molly hesitated, clearly wrestling with servant's discretion versus feminine solidarity. Finally, she leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Mrs. Constance is particular, ma'am. She had certain expectations regarding Mr. Nathaniel's marriage. The circumstances yesterday were not what she anticipated." Clara nearly laughed at the understatement. "I imagine not." "Just be yourself, ma'am." Molly squeezed her hand. "She respects honesty, even when she don't like what she hears." At precisely 11, a footman escorted Clara through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate, finally depositing her before a door of carved oak. The room beyond was a study in controlled elegance. And at its center, seated in a chair that might as well have been a throne, was Constance Ashford. She was ancient, perhaps 80. But age had only refined her rather than diminishing her. White hair swept up in an elaborate style. Bones sharp beneath papery skin. Eyes the same gray as her grandson's, but somehow colder. She wore black silk and pearls, and she examined Clara with the detached interest of a scientist studying an unusual specimen. "So," her voice was surprisingly strong, "you're the young woman who was abandoned at the altar and somehow emerged as mistress of Ashford House." No greeting, no pleasantries. Clara's spine straightened. "I am, ma'am." "Sit." Clara sat in the indicated chair, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. "Tell me about yourself. Not the polished version you'd offer at a dinner party. The truth." It was the last thing Clara had expected. She drew a careful breath. "My father is a merchant who made unfortunate investments. My mother is the daughter of a Presbyterian minister. We have no great connections, no impressive fortune, no particular claim to significance." She met Constance's eyes directly. "I was engaged to your younger grandson because he found me tolerable, and my family was too desperate to question his motives. I stood at that altar, believing I was about to secure my family's future. Instead, I was publicly humiliated. And then my other grandson appeared." "Yes." "Why did you accept him?" The question cut to the heart of everything Clara had been wondering herself. She considered lying, offering some pretty fiction about gratitude or admiration, but Molly's advice echoed in her mind. She respects honesty. "Because I had no other choice," Clara said. "Because my family would have been ruined by the scandal. Because—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Because he looked at me like I was worth saving." Something flickered in Constance's ancient eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Or surprise. Did he now? "I don't pretend to understand his motives, ma'am. I don't know why he did what he did. But I know that without his intervention, I would have walked out of that church into a life of whispers and closed doors." Clara lifted her chin. "Whatever his reasons, I am grateful." Constance was silent for a long moment. Her gaze bore into Clara with unnerving intensity. "My grandson," she said finally, "has been frozen since his mother died. Longer, perhaps, since his father was never warm to begin with. He has spent 22 years building walls so high that no one can scale them. Not me, not his brother, not any of the suitable young ladies I've paraded before him for the past decade." Clara wasn't sure how to respond. "And then yesterday," Constance continued, "he did something utterly unprecedented. He intervened. He acted. He claimed a bride in the most dramatic fashion imaginable." The old woman leaned forward, "Do you know what I think, Mrs. Ashford?" "No, ma'am." "I think my grandson saw something in you. Something that cracked through that ice of his for the first time in 2 decades. I don't know what it was. Perhaps you don't either yet. But I intend to find out." The words should have felt like a threat. Instead, they felt like something else entirely, like a puzzle piece Clara hadn't known she was missing. "I have no intention of hurting him," she said quietly, "if that's your concern." "Hurt him?" Constance laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "My dear girl, I'm not worried about you hurting Nathaniel. I'm worried about what will happen when he finally allows himself to feel something and discovers he doesn't know how to handle it." She rose, signaling the interview's end. "You may be good for him," Constance said, moving toward the door. "Or you may be a disaster. Either way, it will be interesting to watch." She paused with her hand on the handle. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Ashford. Try not to burn it down." The days that followed were strange, suspended things. Clara learned the rhythms of Ashford House, the way morning light filled the east-facing breakfast room, the echoing footsteps in endless corridors, the particular silence of a house too large for the people who lived in it. And she waited for her husband. Nathaniel was a ghost in his own home. She glimpsed him at meals where they sat at opposite ends of that impossible table exchanging polite observations about weather and estate business, while servants moved silently around them. She sometimes heard his footsteps late at night passing her door on the way to his own chambers in the opposite wing. He never lingered, never initiated conversation beyond what courtesy required, never touched her again after those steadying hands at the altar. But things appeared, small things at first, easily overlooked if she hadn't been paying attention. A book of poetry on her sitting room table, its spine cracked in just the way she liked with a ribbon marking a particular verse about resilience. A vase of summer roses on her breakfast tray, fresh each morning, though she'd never mentioned her fondness for flowers. A cashmere wrap left over her favorite chair in the library, the precise shade of blue she'd admired in a fashion plate, but never mentioned aloud. "Where do these come from?" she asked Molly one morning, gesturing to the new writing habit that had appeared in her dressing room overnight. Deep burgundy wool, cut to her exact measurements, with jet buttons that gleamed like captured shadows. "I couldn't say, ma'am." But Molly's eyes sparkled with knowing. Clara began to watch more carefully. She noticed that the library always seemed to have a fire burning when she arrived, though she kept no regular schedule. That her favorite biscuits lemon with lavender icing appeared on her afternoon tea tray without her ever mentioning her preference. That every room she frequented was somehow warmer, brighter, more comfortable than it had any right to be. And she began to understand. Nathaniel Ashford was not demonstrative. He didn't speak of feelings, or offer compliments, or engage in the small intimacies that most marriages contained. But he watched. He noticed. And in his silent, systematic way, he provided. It was, she realized one evening, as she discovered a first-edition novel she'd mentioned wanting to read months ago, before she'd even met Julian, a form of courtship. Strange, indirect, utterly unlike anything she'd experienced. But courtship nonetheless. The realization made something warm unfurl in her chest. Something dangerous. 3 weeks after the wedding, Clara found Nathaniel in the library. He sat in a leather chair by the fire, a ledger open on his lap, his dark head bent over columns of figures. He hadn't heard her approach, and for a moment she simply stood in the doorway watching him. In unguarded moments like this, the ice melted slightly from his features. She could see the exhaustion in the shadows beneath his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers gripped the pen too tightly. He carried something heavy, she thought, something that bent him even as he refused to break. "Are you going to stand there all evening?" Clara started. He hadn't looked up, but somehow he'd known. "I was trying not to disturb you." Too late. But he set aside the ledger, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Join me." She settled into the offered seat, tucking her feet beneath her the way she'd done at home before she'd learned that proper ladies didn't sit like schoolgirls. If Nathaniel noticed the informality, he didn't comment. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for the book, the Radcliffe novel." Something shifted in his expression. There and gone. You found it. It's a first edition. It must have cost a fortune. Money is not a concern. That's not the point. Clara leaned forward. The point is that I mentioned wanting to read it once, months ago, in passing, to Julian. She held his gaze, and somehow you knew. The silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. My brother talked about you, Nathaniel said finally. During his courtship. Not often, not kindly. But occasionally details emerged. Your preferences, your habits, your history. His jaw tightened. I paid attention. Why? He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time she saw something behind the ice, something vast and complicated and carefully contained. Because he didn't deserve you, Nathaniel said quietly. Because I watched him court you with carelessness and neglect, and I thought... He stopped, seemed to catch himself. You thought what? It doesn't matter. It does, to me. Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was rough, like the words were being dragged from somewhere deep. I thought that if I ever had the chance, I would do better. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than they should have been. And now you have the chance, Clara said softly. Now I have the chance. He held her gaze, and the walls were crumbling now, falling piece by piece. She saw loneliness so profound it ached to witness, grief that had calcified into something sharp and cold, and beneath it all barely visible the faintest flicker of hope. Then he looked away, and the walls rebuilt themselves. It's late, he said. You should rest. Nathaniel. Good night, Clara. It was the first time he'd used her given name. The sound of it in his voice, low, careful, almost reverent, made something crack open in her chest. Good night, she whispered. She left him there by the fire, surrounded by shadows and silence. But as she climbed the stairs to her chambers, she realized something had shifted. The ice had fractured, and Clara was determined to find the man beneath. 2 days later, the letter arrived. Clara was taking breakfast alone. Nathaniel had left early for business in town when Mrs. Pemberton appeared with a silver tray. A single envelope rested upon it, cream-colored and unmarked. This came for you, ma'am, delivered by private messenger. Clara took it with a strange sense of foreboding. The paper was expensive, the handwriting unfamiliar. She broke the seal. My dearest Clara, I know I have no right to contact you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I need you to understand, I never meant to hurt you. I was trapped, desperate, drowning in debts I couldn't repay. Running seemed like the only option. But I was wrong. I've thought of nothing but you since I left. Your face at that altar. The way you must have felt. The horror of what I did. I'm coming back to Philadelphia. I need to see you, to explain, to beg your forgiveness. Please, Clara, give me one chance to make things right. Yours, always. Julian. Clara read the letter 3 times. Her hands were shaking when she finally set it down. Julian was coming back. Julian who had abandoned her. Julian who had left her to face 300 witnesses alone. Julian whose cowardice had forced her into marriage with a stranger. He was coming back, and he wanted forgiveness. Ma'am, Molly's voice made Clara jump. She hadn't heard the girl enter. Are you all right? You've gone awful pale. Clara crumpled the letter in her fist. I'm fine, she said, but her voice came out strangled. Wrong. And somewhere in the distance, she heard the sound of carriage wheels on gravel. Someone had arrived at Ashford House. The letter was still crumpled in Clara's fist when the footman appeared in the doorway. Ma'am, there's a visitor. He's insisting on seeing you. He says, let him in. The voice came from behind Clara, deep, cold, dangerous. She spun around. Nathaniel stood in the opposite doorway, still wearing his riding coat, his dark hair windswept from the journey home. His gray eyes swept over her the crumpled letter, her pale face, her trembling hands, and something terrible settled into his expression. "Nathaniel, I didn't know he was—" "I know." He crossed the room in 3 strides. His hand closed over hers, the one holding the letter, and gently pried it from her fingers. He read it in silence. When he looked up, his eyes had turned to ice. "Stay here," he said. "Nathaniel, stay. Here." He was gone before she could argue. Clara stood frozen for exactly 3 heartbeats. Then she lifted her skirts and followed him. She found them in the entrance hall. Julian Ashford stood just inside the doors, looking thinner than she remembered. His golden hair was disheveled, his traveling clothes rumpled, but his smile, that easy, charming smile that had once made her heart flutter, spread across his face the moment he saw her. "Clara." Her name in his mouth felt like a violation. "You came. I knew you would want to see me. I knew—" "She didn't come for you." Nathaniel's voice cut through the hall like a blade. He positioned himself between Clara and his brother, his shoulders squared, his stance protective. "She came because I couldn't stop her, not because she wanted to see your face." Julian's smile faltered, just for a moment. Then it returned sharper now, more calculated. "Brother, always so dramatic." He spread his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I didn't come to cause trouble. I came to apologize." "Apologize?" "Yes, to Clara, for leaving the way I did." Julian's eyes found hers over Nathaniel's shoulder. "It was cowardly, I know that now. But I was desperate, Clara, drowning in debts I couldn't pay. I thought running was the only way to save us both from— Save us." Clara's voice came out strangled. "You left me standing at an altar in front of 300 people. You destroyed my reputation, my family's future, everything I had. And I'm sorry." Julian took a step forward. "More sorry than I can say. But you have to understand." "She doesn't have to understand anything." Nathaniel's hand shot out, catching Julian's shoulder, stopping him mid-stride. "You are not welcome here. Leave, now." "Or what?" Julian's voice dropped low, dangerous. "You'll have me thrown out of my own family's house. The house where I grew up. The house that should have been—" He stopped himself, but Clara saw something flicker in Nathaniel's expression. Something that looked almost like guilt. "Should have been what?" she asked. Neither brother answered. The silence stretched between them, thick with secrets Clara couldn't name. "I think," Julian said slowly, "that Clara deserves to know the truth." "Don't you, brother?" "Julian." The warning in Nathaniel's voice was unmistakable, but Julian was already smiling, that sharp, knowing smile that made Clara's stomach turn. "Did he tell you about Father's will, Clara? Did he explain why he married you?" Clara's heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" "Julian, don't." "Our father left a provision in his will. Nathaniel had to marry before his 35th birthday, just 3 months away, when you stood at that altar, or forfeit half the Ashford estate." Julian's smile widened. "To me." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She staggered back a step. "Is this true?" Nathaniel turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw the answer before he spoke. "Yes." One word. That was all. But it shattered something inside her that she hadn't even known was whole. "You married me for an inheritance." "No." Clara, listen to me. "You married me to keep your fortune. It's not that simple." "Then explain it to me." Her voice cracked. "Explain how it's not exactly what it sounds like." Nathaniel reached for her. She stepped back. The flash of pain that crossed his face almost made her weaken. Almost. "The will is real," he said quietly. "The deadline is real. But that's not why I married you." "Isn't it?" "No." "Then why?" Clara's hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. "Why me? Why that day? Why?" "Because I couldn't watch him destroy you." Nathaniel's voice was raw, broken, unlike anything she'd heard from him before. Because I'd been watching you for 6 months falling in love with a woman I couldn't have, and when I saw you standing there abandoned, humiliated, about to lose everything I knew, I couldn't let it happen. Not to you, not ever. Clara couldn't breathe. You... what? I love you. The words seemed to tear themselves from his throat. I've loved you since the first time I saw you trying not to cry at one of Julian's dinner parties. I've loved you in silence and desperation and complete certainty that you would never be mine. He stepped closer. She didn't move away. The will gave me an excuse, a justification, something I could hide behind so I wouldn't have to admit the truth. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. That I would have married you anyway, even if it cost me everything. How touching. Julian's voice shattered the moment. Clara had almost forgotten he was there. The cold, heartless Nathaniel Ashford confessing his love. Julian slow-clapped, the sound echoing through the hall like gunshots. Truly moving. But tell me, brother, did you confess before or after you secured your inheritance? Get out. Did you tell her about Mother's rooms, the ones you opened for her? The rooms you kept sealed for 22 years because you couldn't bear to face your grief? Nathaniel went pale. Did you tell her that you've been planning this for months, that you had spies watching me in Boston, that you knew I would run before I knew it myself? That's not... You orchestrated this entire thing. Julian's voice rose triumphant and cruel. You wanted her from the moment you saw her. And when you realized I would fail her the way I fail everyone, you made your move. You're not a hero, Nathaniel. You're a predator. Enough! Clara's voice rang through the hall. Both brothers turned to stare at her. She was shaking. Tears streamed down her face, but her spine was straight, and her chin was lifted, and something fierce burned in her eyes. I have had enough of both of you. She pointed at Julian. You abandoned me at an altar. You left me to face 300 witnesses alone. You destroyed my family's reputation and ran away like a coward. I don't care why you did it. I don't care about your debts, or your desperation, or your pretty excuses. You are nothing to me. Nothing. Julian's face went slack with shock. Clara turned to Nathaniel. And you? You married me without telling me about the will. You let me believe it was purely noble when there was practical benefit involved. You kept secrets that I had every right to know. Nathaniel flinched. But... Clara continued, her voice wavering. You also saved me. You gave my family security. You treated me with respect and care. You noticed things about me that Julian never bothered to see. She drew a shaky breath. I don't know if what you feel for me is love or obligation or something in between. But I know one thing for certain. She met his eyes. You never abandoned me. You never made me feel like a fool. And right now, that matters more than anything else. Nathaniel's expression cracked. For one suspended moment, Clara saw everything. The hope, the fear, the desperate longing he'd been hiding behind walls of ice. Then Julian laughed. Oh, this is precious. This is truly precious. He shook his head, still laughing. You think he loves you, Clara? He doesn't know how to love. He never learned. Our father made sure of that. Julian, Nathaniel said quietly. I'm warning you. What? To not tell her about how father used to lock you in your room for crying, how he told you that emotions were weakness, how he... Nathaniel moved so fast, Clara barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her. The next his fist connected with Julian's jaw, and his brother crashed to the floor. Get out, Nathaniel said. His voice was ice, his hands were shaking. Get out of my house, get out of my sight, and if you ever come near my wife again, I will end you. Julian touched his jaw, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. For a moment, just a moment, something human flickered in his eyes. Something that looked almost like remorse. Then it was gone. This isn't over, he said, climbing to his feet. Not even close. He walked out the door without looking back. Silence fell. Clara and Nathaniel stood in the empty hall, the echoes of violence still hanging in the air. "Are you all right?" he asked finally. His voice was hoarse. "I don't know." Clara hugged herself. "I don't know anything anymore." Nathaniel took a step toward her, stopped, his hands clenched at his sides. "I should have told you about the will. From the beginning, I was—" He swallowed hard. "I was afraid that if you knew there was a practical reason for my proposal, you would never believe the emotional one. And the things Julian said about your father." Nathaniel's expression shuddered. "My father was not a kind man." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have for now." He met her eyes. "But I will tell you everything, Clara. All of it. I need time to find the words." Clara studied him, the tension in his shoulders, the shadows in his eyes, the way he held himself like a man expecting to be struck. "All right," she said quietly. "I can wait." Something broke in his expression, relief, gratitude, something deeper that she couldn't name. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Clara managed a shaky smile. "I'm still furious about the will." "You have every right to be." "I know." For a moment, something that might have been humor flickered between them. Fragile. Precious. A lifeline in the storm. Then Mrs. Pemberton appeared, her face carefully neutral, despite what she must have witnessed. "Ma'am, Mr. Ashford. The elder Mrs. Ashford is requesting your presence. Immediately." Clara and Nathaniel exchanged a glance. Whatever reprieve they'd earned, it was about to end. Constance Ashford was waiting for them in her sitting room, her ancient eyes sharp as blades. "Sit," she commanded. They sat. "I heard the commotion," Constance said. "The entire household heard the commotion. Half of Philadelphia probably heard the commotion." She turned her gaze to Nathaniel. "You struck your brother. He deserved it. That's not the point. The point is that you lost control." Constance's voice was knife-edged. "You who have spent 22 years perfecting control lost it completely, over her." She gestured at Clara. "Grandmother." "Don't grandmother me. I told you that girl would be either good for you or a disaster." Constance's lips thinned. "It seems we're heading for disaster." Clara's spine stiffened. "With respect, ma'am, I am sitting right here." "I'm aware." "Then perhaps you could address me directly instead of speaking about me as though I were furniture." The silence that followed was absolute. Nathaniel looked at Clara with something like wonder. Constance looked at her with something like reassessment. "Well," the old woman said finally, "you have backbone. That's something." "I have more than backbone, ma'am. I have questions." Clara leaned forward. "You knew about the will. You knew about the deadline. Did you also know that your grandson was planning to marry me if Julian ran?" Constance's expression flickered. "I suspected." "And you said nothing." "What was there to say? Nathaniel had been watching you for months. I could see him falling even if he couldn't admit it to himself." Constance's voice softened barely. "When Julian announced his engagement, I thought my grandson's heart would finally break. But then I saw something else. I saw him planning." "Planning what?" "For this. For exactly this." Constance gestured at the room, at Nathaniel, at everything. "He prepared the rooms, commissioned the clothes, made arrangements for your family's debts all before the wedding. All in case Julian did exactly what everyone who knew him expected him to do." Clara turned to Nathaniel. "Is this true?" He couldn't meet her eyes. "I told you. I suspected Julian would run. I prepared for the possibility." "You didn't just prepare. You hoped." Clara's voice cracked. "You hoped he would abandon me so you could swoop in and take his place." "No." Nathaniel's head snapped up. "That's not I never wanted you to be hurt. I never wanted any of this to happen the way it did. But you benefited from it. Clara, you got everything you wanted. The inheritance, the wife, The satisfaction of being the better brother. Clara's hands were shaking. And all it cost was my humiliation in front of 300 people. That's not fair. Isn't it? Nathaniel rose from his chair. His face was pale. His hands clenched at his sides. I did not orchestrate Julian's abandonment. I did not make him run. I prepared for the possibility because I knew my brother, and because I couldn't bear the thought of you walking out of that church alone. So you claim. So I swear. He stepped closer. On my mother's memory. On everything I hold sacred. I did not want you to be hurt. I wanted to protect you. I have always only wanted to protect you. Clara searched his face for any sign of deception, any hint of the manipulation Julian had accused him of. She found nothing but raw, desperate honesty. I want to believe you, she whispered. Then believe me. It's not that simple. Then let me prove it. Nathaniel reached for her hands. This time she let him take them. Let me show you. Every day for as long as it takes. Let me earn your trust. And if you can't, then I'll let you go. His voice broke on the words. If that's what you want. If that's what would make you happy. I'll let you go. Clara stared at him. This man, this cold, powerful man who had married her on an altar still warm from his brother's abandonment, was offering her freedom. Real freedom. The chance to walk away with her dignity and her security intact. It was more than Julian had ever offered. More than anyone had ever offered. I don't want to go, she heard herself say. Nathaniel's grip tightened on her hands. You don't. No. I want. She took a shaky breath. I want to understand you. I want to know why your father locked you in your room for crying. I want to know why you kept your mother's room sealed for 22 years. I want to know everything. Everything? Everything. Nathaniel was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. My father believed that emotions were weakness. He raised me to be cold, controlled, incapable of feeling. He swallowed hard. When my mother died, I cried. Once. My father locked me in my room for 3 days. He said tears were for women and children, and I was neither. Clara's heart cracked. Nathaniel. I learned to hide, to bury everything so deep that even I couldn't find it. His eyes met hers. Until I watched you smile through Julian's cruelties and saw someone braver than anyone I'd ever known. Until I realized that feeling things, even painful things, might be worth the risk. And the risk is losing you. His voice was raw. Losing this, losing everything I've spent 22 years trying not to want. Clara reached up and touched his face. He shuddered beneath her fingers, like a man who had been starving and was suddenly offered bread. You're not going to lose me, she said softly. Not today, not tomorrow. We'll figure this out together. 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 For one perfect moment, everything else fell away. The secrets, the betrayals, the manipulation and the fear. There was only Clara and Nathaniel standing on the edge of something new. Then Constance cleared her throat. As touching as this is, she said dryly, we have a more pressing problem. Clara and Nathaniel turned to look at her. Julian is not going to give up, Constance continued. He came here for a reason, and it wasn't just to apologize. He wants something, and until we figure out what it is, none of us are safe. What could he possibly want? Clara asked. He lost me. He lost the inheritance. Did he? Constance's eyes were sharp. The will stated that Nathaniel must marry before his 35th birthday. It said nothing about staying married. The blood drained from Clara's face. You mean, if your marriage were to be annulled, if Julian could prove it was somehow fraudulent or coerced, the inheritance would still be his? Clara turned to Nathaniel. His expression had gone cold, hard, the walls slamming back into place. "He wouldn't dare," Nathaniel said quietly. "Wouldn't he?" Constance leaned forward. "This is Julian we're talking about. The boy who gambled away his fortune and ran from his own wedding. The boy who would burn the world down rather than admit he lost." "Then we won't let him win." Clara's voice cut through the tension. Both Nathaniel and Constance turned to look at her. "We won't let him win," she repeated. "Whatever he's planning, whatever he wants, we'll face it together. All of us." Constance studied her for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled. "Perhaps I was wrong about you, Mrs. Ashford," she said. "Perhaps you're not a disaster after all." Clara lifted her chin. "I'm a Whitmore, ma'am. We don't surrender easily." "Good." Constance rose from her chair. "Because the battle has just begun." The next morning, the gossip reached them. Julian Ashford had been seen in Philadelphia telling anyone who would listen that his brother's marriage was a fraud. That Clara had been coerced. That the whole thing was a scheme to steal his rightful inheritance. "Lies," Nathaniel said, his voice tight with fury. "All of it." "The truth doesn't matter." Clara's hands were steady as she poured her tea, though her heart was racing. "Only what people believe." "Then we make them believe us." "How?" Nathaniel was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "There's a gathering next week, the Morrison Ball. Everyone who matters will be there. And if we appear together united, happy, clearly in love, Julian's claims become harder to believe." Clara set down her teacup. "You want to put on a show. I want to protect our marriage, our future, everything we're building together. By pretending? By showing them what we really are." Nathaniel reached across the table and took her hand. Two people who chose each other, despite everything, because of everything. Clara looked at their joined hands. His fingers were strong, warm, steady. "And what are we?" she asked softly. "Really?" Nathaniel's grip tightened. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I want to find out." Clara made her decision. "Then we go to the ball," she said, "together." Nathaniel's eyes searched her face. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure of one thing." Clara squeezed his hand. "Julian doesn't get to destroy us. Not after everything we've survived." Something shifted in Nathaniel's expression. Something that looked almost like hope. "Then we fight," he said. "We fight," Clara agreed. And somewhere in Philadelphia, Julian Ashford was plotting his next move. The week before the Morrison Ball passed like a fever dream. Clara spent hours with Madame Laurent, the finest dressmaker in Philadelphia, being measured and pinned and adjusted until she thought she might scream. Nathaniel spent hours locked in his study, meeting with lawyers and accountants, preparing for whatever Julian might throw at them. They barely saw each other. But every night, without fail, something appeared in Clara's chambers. A book of poetry with a ribbon marking a verse about courage. A single rose from the garden, perfect and dewy. A note in Nathaniel's careful handwriting that said simply, "I'm thinking of you." It was his way, Clara realized. His language. When words failed him, he spoke in gestures. In gifts. In the silent attention that proved he saw her, really saw her, even when the world was crashing down around them. The night of the ball arrived with the weight of a verdict. Clara descended the stairs in a gown of midnight blue silk that shimmered like starlight. Nathaniel waited at the bottom, dressed in formal black, his dark hair swept back from a face that still made her breath catch. His eyes found hers. For a moment, neither of them moved. "You look—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "There are no words." Is that a compliment? It's an understatement. Something warm bloomed in Clara's chest. "You don't look terrible yourself," she managed. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. High praise indeed. He offered his arm. She took it. And together they walked toward the carriage that would carry them into battle. The Morrison estate blazed with light. Carriages clogged the drive as the cream of Philadelphia society arrived to see and be seen. Clara's heart pounded against her ribs as she stepped down from the carriage. Nathaniel's hand steady at her waist. "Remember," he murmured, "you are Clara Ashford, mistress of Ashford House. No one in that ballroom is your equal." "Is that how you survive these things? Pretending superiority?" "It's not pretense." His gray eyes held hers. "It's fact." The announcement of their names sent a ripple through the crowd. Whispers erupted the moment they crossed the threshold. "The Ashfords. Did you hear what Julian's been saying? Fraud, he claims. Coercion." "She does look rather pale. Perhaps there's truth to it." "Hush, they're looking this way." Clara kept her chin lifted, her spine straight, her hand steady on Nathaniel's arm. But inside, she was screaming. They made their way through the crowd, accepting congratulations that ranged from genuine to poisonous. Mrs. Morrison herself greeted them with effusive warmth that felt calculated, her eyes darting between them as though searching for cracks. "Mr. Ashford, how delightful that you could attend. And the new Mrs. Ashford, my dear, you look positively radiant. One would never guess you'd been through such an ordeal." "What ordeal?" Clara smiled sweetly. "I married well. I can think of worse fates." Mrs. Morrison's smile faltered. Beside her, Nathaniel made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. They danced the first waltz together. Nathaniel led her through the steps with the same controlled precision he brought to everything. But halfway through the dance, his hold tightened, his gaze fixed on something over her shoulder. "What is it?" Clara asked. "Julian's here." Her blood turned to ice. "Where?" "By the punch bowl, with a woman I don't recognize." Clara turned her head following his gaze. Julian stood at the edge of the ballroom, looking healthier than when she'd last seen him. His golden hair was perfectly styled, his evening clothes immaculate, and on his arm was a woman who made Clara's stomach drop. She was beautiful, blonde and elegant with the kind of cold perfection that belonged on a marble statue. Her smile was sharp as a blade, and her eyes pale blue, and calculating swept over Clara with undisguised contempt. "Do you know her?" Nathaniel asked. "No, but something tells me I'm about to." The waltz ended. Before Clara could escape to the safety of the crowd, Julian was moving toward them. The blonde woman glided at his side, her smile never wavering. "Brother," Julian's voice carried across the dance floor. "Clara, how wonderful to see you both." "Julian," Nathaniel's voice was ice. "I thought I made myself clear at Ashford House." "You made many things clear. But this is a public gathering, and I have every right to attend." Julian gestured to his companion. "Allow me to introduce Miss Harriet Fairfax. She's been dying to meet the famous Clara Ashford." Harriet's smile widened. "So this is the infamous bride." Her voice dripped honey. "How quaint. You're exactly as Julian described." "And how is that?" Clara asked. "Plain, desperate, easily manipulated." The words landed like slaps. Clara's hands clenched at her sides, but before she could respond, Nathaniel stepped forward. His presence was suddenly overwhelming, tall and cold, and radiating danger. "Miss Fairfax," he said quietly, "I suggest you reconsider your next words very carefully." "Oh, I've considered them." Harriet laughed, a delicate tinkling sound that grated against Clara's nerves. "I've considered everything quite carefully. You see, I know things about your marriage that would make this entire ballroom gasp. Such as the fact that Clara Whitmore never wanted to marry you, that she was coerced into accepting your proposal because the alternative was public ruin." Harriet's eyes gleamed. "Such as the fact that this entire marriage is a sham designed to steal Julian's inheritance." The whispers around them had stopped. Every eye in the ballroom was fixed on their little group. "That's a lie," Clara said. Her voice shook despite her best efforts. "All of it." "Is it Harriet moved closer. I have witnesses, Mrs. Ashford. People who saw you crying in the church before Nathaniel proposed. People who heard him threaten you with ruin if you refused. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? Tell us. Harriet spread her hands. Tell everyone here how you willingly married a man you'd barely spoken to. A man who planned this entire thing. A man who... Enough! Nathaniel's voice cracked through the ballroom like a whip. The crowd fell silent. You want the truth, Miss Fairfax. Here it is. Nathaniel turned to face the watching crowd, his expression carved from stone. My brother abandoned Clara Whitmore at the altar. He fled like a coward, leaving her to face 300 witnesses alone. I offered her a choice, not a threat, not coercion, a choice. She could walk away ruined, or she could accept my proposal and save her family. And conveniently secure your inheritance. Julian cut in. Yes. Nathaniel's admission sent a gasp through the crowd. My father's will required me to marry before my 35th birthday. That deadline was approaching. But, he turned to Clara. His gray eyes held hers with an intensity that made her heart stop. But that's not why I married her. I married her because I'd been watching her for 6 months. I married her because I fell in love with a woman who deserved better than my brother's cruelty. I married her because when I saw her standing alone at that altar, I knew I couldn't let her walk away. Clara couldn't breathe. Nathaniel. I should have told you about the will from the beginning. I was a coward, not unlike my brother, though I hate to admit it. I was afraid that if you knew about the inheritance, you would never believe that my feelings were real. He reached for her hands. She let him take them. But they are real, Clara. More real than anything I've ever felt. And I don't care who knows it. The ballroom was so quiet, Clara could hear her own heartbeat. Then Julian started laughing. Bravo, brother. Bravo. He slow clapped, the sound echoing through the silence. A moving performance. Truly. But words are just words, aren't they? And I have something more substantial. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. This, Julian said, holding it up for the crowd to see, is a sworn statement from Reverend Miller, the man who performed your marriage ceremony. In it, he testifies that Clara Whitmore appeared distressed and confused during the vows, that she hesitated before saying, I do, that the entire ceremony had the air of coercion rather than consent. Clara's blood ran cold. That's not... Furthermore, Julian continued, I have statements from 3 guests who witnessed Nathaniel gripping Clara's arms during his proposal. Restraining her, some might say, preventing her from fleeing. He was steadying me because I nearly fainted. Perhaps. Or perhaps he was forcing your compliance. Julian smiled. Either way, I've submitted these documents to a judge. I'm seeking an annulment, Clara. And when I get it, and I will get it, the inheritance reverts to me, as it always should have. The whispers erupted into a roar. Clara felt the floor tilting beneath her feet. This couldn't be happening. After everything they'd survived, the humiliation, the secrets, the fragile trust they'd begun to build, Julian was going to destroy it all with a stack of lies. You're lying, she said. Her voice came out strangled. You've bribed these people. You've fabricated evidence. Prove it. Julian's smile widened. That's the beautiful thing about the law, Clara. It doesn't matter what actually happened. It only matters what can be proven. And right now, everything I have supports my version of events. Nathaniel stepped forward. His face was pale with fury. His hands clenched at his sides. You won't get away with this. I already have. Julian straightened his cravat. The hearing is scheduled for next week. Until then, I suggest you enjoy your marriage while it lasts. He offered his arm to Harriet. Shall we? They swept away, leaving Clara and Nathaniel standing alone in a sea of whispers. We need to leave, Nathaniel said quietly. If we leave now, they'll think we're guilty. If we stay, I'm going to kill my brother in front of 300 witnesses. Clara looked at his face, the barely contained rage, the desperation, the fear he was trying so hard to hide, and made her decision. Then we leave together. The carriage ride home was silent. Clara stared out the window at the dark countryside, her mind racing. Julian had outmaneuvered them. He'd prepared for this, had probably been planning it since the moment he decided to return. And she had walked right into his trap. "I'm sorry," Nathaniel said finally. Clara turned to look at him. In the shadows of the carriage, his face looked older, wearier. For what? For all of this. For the will, for the secrets, for underestimating Julian. He ran a hand through his hair. "I thought I could protect you. I thought I could fix everything. But I've only made things worse. You didn't make Julian bribe witnesses. No, but I gave him the ammunition. If I'd told you about the will from the beginning, if I'd been honest." "Then what?" Clara shook her head. "I still would have married you. I still would have made the same choice. The only difference is that I would have known one more fact about the situation." Nathaniel looked at her. "You would have married me anyway, even knowing about the inheritance. I married you because you offered me a choice when no one else would. I married you because you caught me when I fell and didn't let go until I found my footing." Clara's voice softened. "The will doesn't change that. It never did." Something cracked in his expression. "Clara." "But we have to fight this," she continued. "We have to prove that Julian's witnesses are lying. We have to—" "How?" Nathaniel's voice was raw. "He's been planning this for weeks, maybe months. He has documents, testimonies, a judge willing to hear his case, and all we have is our word and the truth, and the truth doesn't always win. Then we make it win." Nathaniel stared at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then slowly he reached across the carriage and took her hand. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "Do you know that—" "I'm terrified, Nathaniel. But I refuse to let Julian destroy what we're building." She squeezed his fingers. "Whatever this is, whatever we're becoming, it's worth fighting for. It is to me. Then fight with me. Not for me. With me." Something shifted in his expression. Something that looked almost like hope. Together. Together. The carriage rolled through the night, carrying them toward an uncertain future. But for the first time since Julian's accusations, Clara felt something other than fear. She felt determination. They arrived at Ashford House to find Constance waiting for them. "I heard," the old woman said before they could speak. "The Morrison ball is the talk of Philadelphia. Julian's accusations are spreading like wildfire." "Grandmother." "Don't grandmother me. We have work to do." Constance's ancient eyes were sharp. "Julian thinks he's won, but he's forgotten one thing." "What's that?" "I know things about my grandson that he'd rather keep buried." Constance smiled a thin, dangerous smile. "Things that would destroy his credibility entirely." Clara felt a spark of hope. "What kind of things?" "The kind that require proof. Proof I've been gathering for years, waiting for the moment Julian finally went too far." Constance turned toward her wing of the house. "Come to my sitting room tomorrow morning, both of you. It's time you learned the truth about the Ashford family." She disappeared into the shadows, leaving Clara and Nathaniel alone. "What do you think she knows?" Clara whispered. "With my grandmother, it could be anything." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "But whatever it is, it might be enough to save us. Or destroy us. That too." They stood in the entrance hall, the weight of everything pressing down on them. Clara thought of the trial ahead, the accusations, the possibility that despite everything Julian might win. "I should let you rest," Nathaniel said quietly. "Probably. It's been a difficult evening." An understatement. Neither of them moved. "Clara," Nathaniel said. His voice was strange. hesitant. "When I said those things at the ball about falling in love with you, I meant every word." Clara's heart stuttered. "I know. I don't expect you to feel the same. Not yet. Not after everything I've put you through." He swallowed hard. "But I need you to know that regardless of what happens with the trial, regardless of whether we win or lose, my feelings for you are real. They have always been real." Clara reached up and touched his face. He shuddered beneath her fingers. "I'm starting to believe that," she whispered. It's a process." She managed a small smile. "You're not the only one with walls, Nathaniel. I've spent my whole life protecting myself from disappointment. Learning to trust doesn't happen overnight. But it can happen. It's happening, right now. Every day that you show me who you really are underneath the ice, it's happening." Something broke in his expression. Something raw and vulnerable, and desperately hopeful. "Then I'll keep showing you," he said. "For as long as it takes." "That might be a very long time." "I'm patient." Clara laughed, despite herself. It was the first real laugh she'd managed since the ball. "I've noticed." The tension between them shifted, became something warmer, something almost tender. "Good night, Clara," Nathaniel said softly. "Good night." He turned toward his wing of the house, then stopped. "Clara?" "Yes. Thank you." His voice was barely audible. "For believing in me. For fighting with me. For being stronger than I ever could have imagined." Before she could respond, he was gone. Clara stood alone in the entrance hall, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart was pounding. She was falling, she realized. Slowly, carefully, despite every warning her mind could muster. She was falling in love with her husband, and tomorrow she would have to fight to keep him. Morning brought revelations. Clara found her way to Constance's sitting room at precisely 9 o'clock. Nathaniel was already there, his face drawn with exhaustion and something that looked like dread. "Sit," Constance commanded. Clara sat. "What I'm about to tell you does not leave this room. Not until the trial. Not until we know how to use it." "Grandmother." "Be quiet, Nathaniel. This concerns you as much as Clara." Constance's eyes were hard. "It's time you both understood what Julian really is." She drew a leather folder from the drawer of her writing desk. 3 years ago, a young woman named Mary Sullivan disappeared from Philadelphia. She was a maid at a boarding house where Julian occasionally stayed. Pretty girl, trusting, too trusting. Clara's stomach tightened. Julian seduced her, promised her marriage. When she became pregnant, he panicked. Constance's voice was cold. He gave her money, a great deal of it, and told her to disappear, to never contact him again, to never tell anyone who the father was. "My God," Clara whispered. "Mary Sullivan had a sister. A young woman who worked in this very house." Constance's eyes met Clara's. "Molly Sullivan. Your lady's maid." The floor dropped away beneath Clara's feet. "Molly is Mary's sister, yes. She came to me 2 years ago seeking employment, seeking access to the family that had destroyed her sister." Constance's smile was thin. "I gave her both. You knew. I knew. And I've been waiting, gathering evidence, preparing for the moment Julian's arrogance finally gave me the opportunity to act." Nathaniel's face had gone white. "Where is Mary now?" "Safe. Hidden. With proof of everything Julian did to her." Constance leaned forward. "Signed letters, bank records, a child who looks exactly like her father." "A child?" Clara's voice cracked. "Julian has a child, a son, 3 years old, named Thomas." Constance's expression hardened. "Julian knows nothing about him. If he did, he would have destroyed the evidence long ago. But Mary kept everything, every letter, every promise, every lie." The implications crashed over Clara like a wave. "If this comes out, Julian's reputation is destroyed. His claims against your marriage become laughable. Who would believe a man capable of abandoning his own child? Constance closed the folder. It's a weapon, Clara. A terrible one. But Julian gave us no choice. We'd be destroying him, Nathaniel said quietly. He tried to destroy you first. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it necessary. Constance's eyes were flinty. This is war, Nathaniel. And in war you use every weapon available. Or you lose. Silence fell over the room. Clara looked at Nathaniel. His face was a mask of conflict, disgust at what his brother had done, reluctance to expose it, and underneath it all, the desperate need to protect what they had. We have to use it, Clara said finally. If Julian wins this trial, our marriage is annulled. I lose everything, my family's security, my reputation, everything Nathaniel tried to give me. And if we expose him, Nathaniel asked, then we protect ourselves. And we protect Mary Sullivan's son from a father who abandoned him before he was born. Constance nodded slowly. The girl has sense, she said. More than you, Nathaniel. I'm not arguing against using it. I'm just... He ran a hand through his hair. Julian is still my brother. Underneath everything. He's still my blood. Your blood tried to destroy your marriage. I know. Your blood abandoned an innocent woman and child. I know. Your blood would burn this entire family to the ground if it meant getting what he wanted. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. I know, grandmother. I know. He looked at Clara. What do you want to do? Clara didn't hesitate. I want to fight. I want to win. And if that means exposing Julian for who he really is, then that's what we do. Even knowing the cost of losing is higher. Nathaniel studied her face, searching for doubt perhaps, finding none. Then we fight, he said finally. Together. Together, Clara agreed. Constance smiled a predator's smile. Then let's begin. The trial came faster than Clara expected. 1 week of preparation. 1 week of sleepless nights and whispered strategy sessions. 1 week of watching Nathaniel's face grow more haggard, more determined, more desperate. And then they were standing in a courtroom facing a judge who held their future in his hands. Julian looked confident. He sat at the opposite table with Harriet beside him, his expression smug, his posture relaxed. He thought he'd won. That much was clear. Let him think it, Clara told herself. Let him feel secure. The fall will be harder. The prosecution presented Julian's evidence first. The statements from witnesses who claimed to have seen Nathaniel restraining Clara. The testimony from Reverend Miller about her distress. Document after document painting a picture of coercion and manipulation. Clara sat stone-faced through all of it. Nathaniel's hand found hers beneath the table. She held on like a lifeline. Then it was their turn. Constance's lawyer, a man named Harrison, who looked like a kindly grandfather but spoke like a blade, rose to present their defense. Your Honor, we have evidence that calls into question the credibility of Mr. Julian Ashford, evidence that reveals a pattern of deception, manipulation, and moral corruption. Julian's smug expression flickered. 3 years ago, Harrison continued, Mr. Julian Ashford seduced a young woman named Mary Sullivan. He promised her marriage. When she became pregnant, he abandoned her, gave her money to disappear, forced her to raise his child alone in shame and secrecy. The courtroom erupted. Julian was on his feet. That's a lie, a fabrication. We have signed letters, Your Honor, bank records, and most importantly, Harrison paused for effect. We have Mary Sullivan herself, willing to testify, willing to show the court the child who bears Mr. Julian Ashford's unmistakable resemblance. The judge's gavel cracked down. Order. There will be order in this courtroom. But the damage was done. Julian's face had gone white. His confident posture had crumbled. And across the courtroom, Harriet Fairfax was looking at him with an expression of dawning horror. You have a child, she hissed. You never told me you have a child. Harriet, I can explain. You told me you were innocent. You told me Clara was the manipulator. Miss Fairfax. The judge's voice was sharp. You will remain silent, or you will be removed. Harriet fell silent, but her eyes remained fixed on Julian with burning accusation. The trial stretched on for 3 more hours. Mary Sullivan testified, a quiet woman with sad eyes, who told her story with devastating simplicity. Molly Sullivan sat in the gallery, tears streaming down her face, as she watched her sister finally speak the truth. And through it all, Julian's carefully constructed case crumbled like sand. By the end, the verdict was almost anticlimactic. This court finds no evidence of coercion in the marriage of Nathaniel and Clara Ashford, the judge declared. The petition for annulment is denied. Furthermore, the court finds that Julian Ashford's testimony was deliberately misleading and recommends investigation into possible perjury. The gavel fell. It was over. Clara's legs went weak. Nathaniel's arm wrapped around her waist, holding her upright. "We won," she whispered. "We won," he confirmed. Across the courtroom, Julian was being surrounded by angry creditors and disgusted former allies. Harriet Fairfax had already fled. And Constance Ashford sat in the gallery, a satisfied smile on her ancient face. But Clara barely noticed any of it. She was looking at her husband, at the man who had saved her at the altar, who had kept her secrets, who had fought beside her when everything seemed lost. "Take me home," she said. Nathaniel's gray eyes searched her face. Home, Ashford House. Clara managed a small smile. Our home. Something broke in his expression. Something that looked like joy. Our home, he repeated. And together they walked out of the courtroom, into the sunshine, into their future. The carriage ride from the courthouse felt different from every ride before. Clara sat beside Nathaniel, not across from him, but beside, and neither of them spoke. The silence was no longer heavy with secrets or tension. It was soft, tender, full of possibilities neither of them had allowed themselves to imagine. Nathaniel's hand rested on hers. His thumb traced slow circles across her knuckles. "I keep expecting to wake up," he said finally. "To discover this was all a dream." "It's not a dream." "How can you be sure?" Clara turned to look at him. In the afternoon light streaming through the window, his face seemed younger, softer. The ice that had defined him for so long was melting, and underneath she could finally see the man he might have been, the man he still could be. "Because in my dreams," she said quietly, "I'm always alone, and right now I'm not." Something cracked in his expression. "Clara, don't say anything, not yet." She squeezed his hand. "Just let this moment exist. Without words, without plans, just us." He nodded, his jaw tightened with emotion he couldn't quite contain. They rode the rest of the way in silence. But it was a different silence now. A silence that felt like home. Ashford House greeted them with celebration. Word had traveled faster than their carriage. By the time they arrived, the entire household had assembled servants lining the entrance hall, faces bright with relief and joy. Molly Sullivan stood at the front, tears streaming down her freckled cheeks. "Ma'am," she managed. "Mr. Ashford, I don't know how to—" Clara pulled her into an embrace. "Your sister was incredibly brave," she whispered. "You both were." Molly's shoulders shook with sobs. "I wanted to tell you, ma'am, from the beginning, but Mrs. Constance said we had to wait, that we had to be careful." "You were careful, and because of that, we won." Clara pulled back, holding Molly at arm's length. "Where is Mary now? Is she safe?" "She's here, ma'am. Mrs. Constance brought her to the house this morning. Her and little Thomas." Clara's heart stuttered. "Can I meet them?" "They're in the East Wing, with Mrs. Constance." Molly wiped her eyes. "Mary's been waiting. She said she wanted to thank you. Both of you." Clara looked at Nathaniel. His expression was unreadable, but his hand found hers again. "Then let's go meet them," he said quietly. Mary Sullivan was nothing like Clara expected. She was small and pale, with dark hair pulled back in a simple knot, and eyes that held years of pain carefully contained. In her arms was a boy of about 3, golden-haired with features that made Clara's breath catch. He looked exactly like Julian. "Mrs. Ashford." Mary's voice was soft, apologetic, as though she expected to be blamed for the chaos her testimony had caused. "I'm sorry for everything. I never wanted to make trouble. I just wanted Julian to acknowledge—" "You have nothing to apologize for." Clara crossed the room and took Mary's free hand. "Julian is the one who wronged you, not the other way around." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "That's not what most people would say." "Then most people are wrong." Constance made a sound that might have been approval. "I told you she had sense," the old woman said. Nathaniel stepped forward. His gaze fell on the boy Thomas, and something complicated crossed his features. "He's my nephew," he said quietly. "Julian's son." "Yes." "And Julian, he never acknowledged him, never provided for him. He gave me money once, to disappear." Mary's voice was bitter. "He said he would ruin me if I ever told anyone the truth." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "That changes now." Mary looked up startled. "What do you mean? Thomas is an Ashford. Regardless of how he came into this world, he carries our blood. He deserves to be acknowledged, provided for, protected." "Mr. Ashford, you don't have to—" "I know I don't have to." Nathaniel's voice softened. "I want to." Julian shirked his responsibility. "I won't." Clara watched her husband speak, this cold, distant man who had once seemed incapable of warmth, and felt something shift inside her. Something final. Something permanent. She loved him. The realization hit her like a wave crashing against rocks. Not the tentative, cautious feeling she'd been nurturing over the past weeks. This was something deeper, truer, inevitable. She loved him, and she was done pretending otherwise. "Nathaniel." He turned to look at her. "I need to speak with you. Alone." Something flickered in his gray eyes. Hope, perhaps. Or fear. Of course. They found their way to the garden, his mother's garden, where roses bloomed in wild profusion, despite the summer heat. The scent of flowers hung heavy in the air, sweet and intoxicating. "Clara, whatever you need to say, I love you." The words fell between them like stones into still water. Nathaniel went utterly still. "What?" "I love you." Clara stepped closer. "I've been fighting it for weeks, telling myself it was gratitude or Stockholm Syndrome or some desperate attempt to make sense of an impossible situation. But it's not. Clara, you saved me at that altar, not just from scandal, from a life of settling for less than I deserved. And then you kept saving me. Every day, with books and roses and cashmere wraps and 1,000 small kindnesses that showed me who you really are." Her voice cracked. "You're not cold, Nathaniel. You never were. You're just afraid. Afraid of feeling things. Afraid of losing people. Afraid of wanting something so badly that losing it would destroy you." Nathaniel's face had gone pale. "How do you—" "Because I'm the same way." Clara reached up and touched his face. "My whole life I've protected myself, kept my expectations low, told myself that wanting too much would only lead to disappointment. And then you came along and ruined everything. I ruined everything. You made me want things." Her voice broke. "A real marriage, a real partnership, a real love. Things I'd convinced myself didn't exist." Nathaniel's hands came up to cup her face. His touch was trembling, reverent. "I've loved you since the moment I saw you," he said hoarsely. "I've loved you in silence and desperation and complete certainty that I didn't deserve you. And I was right, I don't deserve you. Not after everything I've done. Not after the secrets I kept. Don't. Clara. Don't tell me what you don't deserve. She gripped his wrists, holding him in place. Tell me what you want. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. I want you, Nathaniel said finally. I want mornings and evenings and everything in between. I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. I want to learn how to be the man you see when you look at me. Then be him. Clara's voice was fierce. Stop hiding behind your walls. Stop protecting yourself from things that might hurt. Let yourself feel Nathaniel. Let yourself live. It terrifies me. I know. What if I fail? What if I hurt you? Then we deal with it. Together. She pulled his face down toward hers. That's what marriage is. Not perfection. Not protection from pain. Just two people facing everything together. He kissed her. It wasn't like the brief, formal kiss at their wedding. This was desperate, hungry. All the emotion he'd been suppressing pouring out in a single moment. His hands tangled in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck, and Clara finally understood what it meant to be home. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. I've been afraid to say it, afraid that speaking it aloud would make it real, make it something I could lose. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Clara Ashford. His voice broke. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I will spend every day proving it. I will... She kissed him again. Words could wait. This moment couldn't. The weeks that followed transformed everything. Ashford House, once cold and silent, came alive with laughter and light. Clara took charge of the household with a grace that surprised even herself, working alongside Mrs. Pemberton to modernize the running of the estate. Nathaniel emerged from his study, more and more often drawn by his wife's presence, unable to stay away. And the small kindnesses continued. But now, they weren't hidden. Now, when Nathaniel commissioned a new dress for Clara, he presented it himself. When he found a book he thought she'd enjoy, he read passages aloud to her in the library. When he noticed she was cold, he wrapped his arms around her instead of leaving a shawl on her chair. The walls were down. Finally, completely irreversibly down. You're different, Molly observed one morning, helping Clara dress. Both of you. It's like watching flowers bloom. Clara smiled at her reflection. I feel different. Mrs. Constance says she's never seen Mr. Ashford so happy. She says it's practically indecent the way he looks at you. Does she? Those were her exact words, ma'am. Indecent. But she was smiling when she said it, so I reckon she didn't mean it bad. Clara's smile widened. I reckon she didn't. Mary Sullivan and Thomas had been established in a cottage on the Ashford estate. Nathaniel had set up a trust for the boys' education and future, and Mary had been given employment helping with the household accounts. Her sister Molly visited every chance she got. It wasn't perfect. Julian's shadow still hung over them. He had fled Philadelphia after the trial destination unknown, leaving behind a trail of debts and broken promises. Harriet Fairfax had returned to Boston in disgrace, her reputation shattered by her association with him. But the threat he represented had diminished. And Clara found that she no longer feared him. Summer blazed toward its peak. 3 months after the wedding, the anniversary of the day that had changed everything, Clara woke to find Nathaniel's side of the bed empty. She sat up alarmed. In the months since they had finally come together, he had never left without waking her, never disappeared without explanation. Nathaniel. No answer. She pulled on a robe and padded through the house, her heart pounding with irrational fear. The trial was over. Julian was gone. There was no reason to worry. But old habits died hard. She found him in the garden, his mother's garden, standing among the roses as dawn broke over the horizon. "Nathaniel." He turned, and Clara's breath caught. He was crying. Silent tears tracked down his face, catching the early morning light. In his hands he held a single white rose. "I come here sometimes," he said quietly, "when I can't sleep, to talk to her." Clara's heart cracked. "Your mother. She loved this garden. She planned every inch of it herself. After she died, I couldn't bear to look at it. Couldn't bear to see the roses she'd planted still blooming when she was gone. But you kept it. I couldn't destroy it either." His voice was raw. "So I sealed it away, like I sealed everything else." Clara crossed the distance between them and took his hands. "What changed?" "You." He looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "You came into my life and reminded me that loving things doesn't make you weak, that losing people doesn't mean you should never have had them." "Nathaniel." "My mother would have loved you." His voice cracked. "She would have loved your courage, your stubbornness, your refusal to back down from anyone, including me. I wish I could have met her. You would have gotten along famously." A ghost of a smile crossed his features. She was terrifying, in the best possible way. Clara laughed through her own tears. "Then I'll take that as a compliment." It was intended as one. They stood together among the roses, holding hands as the sun rose, and Clara realized something profound. This was what healing looked like. Not the absence of pain, not the erasure of grief, but the ability to hold both the joy and the sorrow, the love and the loss, and keep moving forward anyway. "I have something for you," Nathaniel said. Clara looked up. "What?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I wanted to do this properly. The first time everything happened so fast. You deserved a proposal, and instead you got a rescue." Clara's heart stopped. "Nathaniel, we're already married." "I know, but I want you to choose me, not because you have no other options, not because scandal threatened to destroy you." He opened the box. "Because you want to." Inside was a ring. Not the sapphire she already wore, this was different. A diamond surrounded by smaller emeralds, set in antique gold that gleamed in the morning light. "It was my grandmother's," Nathaniel said. "Given to her by my grandfather on their 25th anniversary. She gave it to me last week and told me I was a fool if I didn't use it." "Constance gave you this," she said, "and I quote, 'The girl has earned it. Don't be an idiot.'" Clara laughed, despite herself. "That sounds like her." "Clara Whitmore Ashford." Nathaniel dropped to one knee right there among the roses, morning dew soaking through his trousers. "Will you marry me again properly this time, not because you have to, but because you choose to?" Tears streamed down Clara's face. "Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes. 1,000,000 times yes." She pulled him to his feet and kissed him hard. "But we are not having another ceremony in front of 300 witnesses." "God, no." Nathaniel's arms wrapped around her. "Just us. And whoever we actually want there. Deal." They held each other as the sun rose higher, bathing the garden in golden light. And Clara knew with absolute certainty that she had finally found what she'd spent her whole life searching for. Not rescue, not security, not even love. Home. The second wedding took place on a September morning. Not in a church, not in front of Philadelphia's elite, but in the garden surrounded by roses with only the people who truly mattered. Clara's parents sat in the front row, her mother weeping with joy, her father looking healthier than he had in years. The debts were paid. The shame was forgotten. And their daughter was marrying for love, the kind of love they'd always hoped she would find. Her sisters were there too, Louisa and Abigail giggling and whispering about how romantic it all was. Molly Sullivan stood nearby, clutching a handkerchief, ready to cry at the first sentimental word. Constance Ashford presided over the ceremony like a queen on her throne. She had insisted on giving Clara away, declaring that The girl needs someone with spine, and her father is too emotional. No one had argued. And Nathaniel. Nathaniel stood at the altar, a simple arch of roses and greenery, looking at Clara like she was the only person in the world. He wasn't wearing black this time. At Clara's insistence, he had chosen deep blue, a color that softened his features and brought out the warmth she now knew lived behind his gray eyes. He looked for the first time since she'd met him, like a man at peace. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Miller, began the same reverend who had married them the first time, now considerably more relaxed. "We are gathered here to celebrate the union of two souls who have already proven their commitment to each other in the most trying of circumstances." Clara barely heard the words. She was too busy looking at her husband, at the way his hands trembled slightly as he held hers, at the way his eyes glistened with unshed tears, at the way his whole body seemed to lean toward her, as though he couldn't bear even inches of separation. When it came time for the vows, Nathaniel spoke first. "I, Nathaniel, take you, Clara, to be my wife. Not because circumstance brought us together, not because scandal forced our hands, but because I choose you." His voice cracked. "I choose your strength and your stubbornness. I choose your courage and your kindness. I choose every morning for the rest of my life, waking up beside you grateful for every moment we have." Clara's tears fell freely now. "I, Clara, take you, Nathaniel, to be my husband, not because you rescued me, though you did. Not because you protected me, though you have, but because underneath all that ice, I found the warmest heart I've ever known." She squeezed his hands. "I choose your silence and your secrets. I choose your fear and your hope. I choose to stand beside you through every storm until there are no storms left to weather." Reverend Miller smiled. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you again husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." This time, when Nathaniel kissed her, there was nothing formal about it. He swept her into his arms and kissed her like the world was ending. Like they were the only two people who had ever existed. Like all the pain and fear and loneliness of his life had finally found its answer. The small crowd erupted in cheers. Constance dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief and pretended she wasn't crying. And Clara, wrapped in her husband's arms, finally understood something she had spent her whole life trying to learn. Love wasn't about being saved. It was about being seen. About finding someone who looked at all the broken pieces of you and chose to stay anyway. Who held your hand through the darkness and never let go. Who built something new from the wreckage of what came before. She had been abandoned at an altar. She had married his cold, powerful brother. And against all odds, she had found everything she never knew she needed. The celebration continued into the evening. Tables had been set up in the garden laden with food and wine and flowers. Lanterns glowed in the gathering darkness, casting warm light over faces bright with joy. Clara danced with her father, with Nathaniel, with Constance, who moved with surprising grace for a woman of 80. She laughed more than she had in years. She felt lighter than she ever had, and when the night grew late and the guests began to drift away, Nathaniel found her standing alone among the roses. "Happy?" he asked quietly. Clara turned to look at him. Her husband, her partner, her home. More than I ever thought possible. He wrapped his arms around her from behind his chin, resting on her shoulder. "I keep waiting to wake up," he admitted. To discover this was all a dream. Still, always. His arms tightened. "You're too good to be real." Clara laughed softly. "I'm not good. I'm stubborn and opinionated, and I have a terrible temper when provoked." "I know. I love it." "You're impossible." Also true. They stood in silence, watching the last lanterns flicker in the darkness. Above them, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds thrown across velvet. "Nathaniel. What do you want for the future?" He was quiet for a moment, thinking. I want mornings like this one, he said finally. I want years of learning everything about you. I want to watch you grow and change and become whoever you're meant to be. And I want to be there for all of it. Clara's heart swelled. That's a good answer. I've been practicing. She laughed and turned in his arms facing him. I want children, she said. Eventually, when we're ready. Something shifted in his expression. Hope, fear, longing. Children, if you want them. He swallowed hard. I don't know how to be a father. My own father was terrible. I know. Clara reached up and touched his face. But you're not him. You've already proven that. How? Thomas, Mary's son. Clara smiled. The moment you learned about him, you stepped up. You provided for him, protected him, gave him the acknowledgement Julian never would. That's different. Is it? Nathaniel was silent. You'll make mistakes, Clara continued. So will I. That's what parents do. But the difference between you and your father is that you'll care about those mistakes. You'll try to do better. You believe that. I believe in you. She pulled his face down toward hers. I believe in us. He kissed her, soft this time, tender. Then we'll figure it out, he whispered against her lips. Together. Together. The word had become their promise, their prayer, their answer to everything. Whatever came next, children challenges years of joy and sorrow and everything in between, they would face it together. That was enough. That was everything. 1 year later, Clara stood at the altar of Christ Church once more. Not for a wedding, for a christening. The baby in her arms was small and perfect, with dark hair like his father and eyes that already held a hint of gray. William Nathaniel Ashford, named for Nathaniel's father, not to honor him, but to reclaim the name. To prove that legacies could be broken, that children could become better than their parents. Nathaniel stood beside her, one arm wrapped protectively around her waist, his free hand gently touching his son's cheek. He was still learning how to be a father, still making mistakes, still sometimes freezing when emotion overwhelmed him. But he was trying, and that was everything. In the pews sat everyone who mattered. Clara's parents beaming with pride. Her sisters cooing over the baby. Constance Ashford looking like a cat who had gotten into the cream. Molly Sullivan crying happy tears. Mary Sullivan and Thomas, part of the family now in every way that mattered. Even Julian had sent a letter. Clara hadn't read it. Hadn't wanted to. Whatever apologies or explanations he offered came too late. He had made his choices. Now he had to live with them. But she had noticed Nathaniel tucking the letter into his desk drawer instead of burning it. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. The ceremony was brief. William was blessed, his name recorded in the parish records, his place in the family secured. And when they emerged into the sunlight, Clara looked at the man beside her, her husband, her partner, her home, and felt her heart overflow. "Thank you," she whispered. Nathaniel looked at her confused. For what? For that day at the altar. For not letting me walk away alone. His expression softened. I would do it again. 1,000 times. 1,000,000. I know. Clara smiled through tears. That's why I love you. He kissed her forehead, then their son's, then her lips. Let's go home, he said. Home. Ashford House. The garden. The library filled with books and the chambers filled with roses and the life they had built from the ruins of scandal. It wasn't perfect. Nothing was perfect. But it was theirs. Clara shifted William in her arms and took her husband's hand. Let's go home, she agreed. And together they walked toward their future. Some love stories begin with once upon a time. This one began with disaster, with a bride abandoned at an altar, with whispers and scandal and 300 witnesses to her destruction. with a cold, powerful man who offered her salvation and then offered her something far more precious: his heart. Clara Whitmore had learned that love didn't arrive in perfect packages. It came broken and complicated and terrifying. It required trust when trust seemed impossible. It demanded vulnerability when vulnerability meant risking everything. But it was worth it. Every tear, every fear, every moment of doubt. Worth it. She had been abandoned at the altar. She had married his cold, powerful brother. And she had found more happiness than she ever dreamed possible. Because sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with once upon a time. Sometimes they begin with the end of the world and build something beautiful from the ashes.